I'm chair of the Sonoma County ACLU chapter. And let me start bragging first. Our chapter won the Dick Criley Activism Award for 2010. And we got that nice plaque. This is given every year by the Northern California ACLU to the county chapter or the local chapter that has proved the most active in getting people involved in defending civil liberties. So we won this once in 2002 and again for 2010, and we are one of only 2 chapters in Northern California that have won it twice. And Dick Criley was a really effective leader of the Monterey chapter of the ACLU, a longtime activist, and somebody that we're proud to have our chapter associated with. So that's our board. And of course, I've got a few notes. I want to thank our gold sponsor, which is a computer repair center. I really appreciate that. And our other sponsors are Ann Teresa Agason, Richard Ingram and Pamela Harrington, Evan Livingstone, Judy McCann and Steve Fabian, Marvin and Leslie Peterson, the Police Accountability Clinic and Helpline, the initials PATCH, P-A-C-H, and they have a table, and Big Man Howard and Carol Hyams, I'm sorry, Carol, I blocked in your name, and Ben Sari are here with the Police Accountability Clinic. Joe and Pixie Romano, Joel Richard Rubin, Al Stephen and Neva Truer, Judith Volkart, who couldn't be here tonight, a longtime board member, and she couldn't come, but she wanted to contribute as a sponsor. And Paul and Michelle Ziegelbaum. And I just want to apologize, there's a typo in the program.
I thought part of the deal was changing my name.
No, we didn't want to change your name, Paul. It says Pam in the program, but it's Paul and Michelle.
Nice to know you.
And if you get a chance to read your program, probably have time while you're waiting for the food. One person, once again, has put this program together with an enormous amount of work, and that is Steve Fabian. And so there are a lot of things to read in there. I might call your attention to the year in review, which I contributed, which tells a little bit about what we've done in the past year and gives us, I hope, impetus to do more in the coming year. I'd like to mention an upcoming event, which is the Sonoma County Human Rights Commission is meeting on Tuesday, May 24th, to consider a proposal to issue county ID cards that would make it possible for people who don't have immigration documents to be able to identify themselves to authorities and not get hauled into the county jail to be deported. So that's a very important initiative. It's going to the Human Rights Commission, which basically can't approve anything, but they can pass it along to the Board of Supervisors. And so they should be encouraged to do that. And they are meeting 5:30 p.m. 5:30 p.m. Tuesday, May 24th. And somewhere here I had it's at the County Administration Center, and they may, in fact, move it to one of the other places, but watch for an announcement of where that is. And Gail Jonas of the Human Rights Commission is here, Gail, where are you? There she is. And if you'd like to ask her about the commission or about this issue, that's the person to ask.
Art Warmuth. Another commissioner.
Know that. Art Warmus is here, who's also on the commission. There's Art. I didn't see you. Oh, thanks, and I hope you had a chance to visit the tables where people have literature and you can learn about the NAACP, the Peace and Justice Center, the Police Accountability Clinic and Helpline, and the ACLU Sonoma County chapter.
Now, NOW. Now.
And now has a table. Okay. That's great. Okay. When you get a chance, if you haven't already, those are tables to visit. And I hope everybody's buying raffle tickets. I hope you all got a chance to get in on the raffle, which is, I think, you still selling? Okay. And this is going to be the 50-50 raffle right at the end of the program, so you have to stay. Where the winner gets half of the proceeds and the ACLU chapter gets the other half. While I'm mentioning the NAACP table, I want to mention a publishing event. Two of the former board members of our chapter, Ann Gray and Sherry Graves, have produced a book. It has just come out. It's called Glimpses. And it is a history of African Americans in Santa Rosa. So they've done a lot of research on that, and it is available back at the NAACP table. It costs $30 because it's raising funds to support scholarships through the NAACP and the Gray Foundation for worthy students. While we're talking about books, I want to plug one. I mentioned it last year when it was fairly newly published, but I'll mention it again. This is called Wherever There's a Fight by Elaine Ellenson and Stan Yogi, who are stalwart ACLU members in Northern California. This is a history of the struggle for civil rights in California, and it has a lot of things that you may never have heard about, but some of which will curl your hair, but others of which will make you really stand up and applaud the people who fought these battles before the ACLU was started. This goes back to the 19th century, and then it goes through the 20th century with the battles that the Northern California ACLU and the Southern California ACLU have been involved in, including the story of Jack Green and Saul Nitzberg, and our Civil Liberties Award is named after Jack Green. They were young union organizers in Sonoma County in 1935, and that's mentioned in the program. They were grabbed by vigilantes, beaten and tarred and feathered. And the Northern California ACLU was new at the time, and they came up here and pushed the prosecution of the vigilantes, some of whom were very prominent people in Sonoma County. And unfortunately, there was no conviction. There was a jury trial finally through the ACLU's efforts, and the jury deliberated a few minutes and ruled that they were innocent. But through the efforts of the ACLU, the names of the people who were involved in that incident were revealed, and it was revealed to what extent the powers that be in Sonoma County were involved in that kind of activity. I'd like to recognize and mentioning tables. The ACLU table, in addition to having some interesting literature, We have a sign-up sheet if you'd like to be a member. And we have the My ACLU campaign, which is a little complicated, but you can get some money out of it, or you can get some money for an ACLU chapter by signing up the new members for the ACLU. It's explained in the program, and there is there'll be somebody at the ACLU table to sign you up for My ACLU. I wanted to recognize we have some former Jack Green Award winners here. Tanya Brannon. John Durr, who's one of the founders of this chapter. Alicia Sanchez, who won the award last year. Lee Torliat, who's on the board for some time. I don't think Maddie Rudino made it tonight. Yeah, she is. Oh, Maddie. Maddie Rudino. I hadn't seen you. I think we're sort of getting through the announcements. And have I forgotten anything? Oh, Edie, I'm sorry. I wrote your name in. I wrote your name in and then I overlooked it. Edie Sesame. And to get started with our program, I'd like to introduce Shayna Gallender of the Northern California ACLU. Came up here from San Francisco, and she's going to bring some remarks about the ACLU of Northern California.
Thank you, Marty. You're very tall. You guys look beautiful out there. How are you doing? Good. Now you have food. Who has food already? Are people excited about the food? Okay. As exciting as the food is, I very much appreciate your attention. I'm just going to talk for about 5 minutes and then turn it over to our other speakers. As Marty said, my name is Shayna Gallender. I'm the organizing director for the ACLU of Northern California. And it's really my honor to go to work at the ACLU every day. And I just want to start with some appreciations here. First, to congratulate and appreciate Tommy Smothers and Maggie Koshnier, who are going to be our awardees tonight. Let's give them a preemptive round of applause. And I'd just like to echo Marty's comments and thank the leadership of our Sonoma County chapter. The board members are sitting over here at this table, and they are a very capable, hardworking group of leaders. And I just want to appreciate them for their work, not only for this event, but for all the work that they do year-round here in partnership with all of you. And if you haven't gotten a chance to know the board members or haven't been able to get more involved in the chapter, I would encourage you to do so. It means a lot to the ACLU to have folks here on the ground. And Sonoma County is a wonderful community, and I just want to thank them. And of course, I just appreciate all of you for being here. This is just a wonderful event, and your support really means a lot. There's a lot of work that we can only do with membership dollars, so thank you. So we're going to hear a little later from our colleague Raymond Reitman at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and she's going to talk about a very important emerging area of work around the intersection of privacy and technology, and I'm looking forward to her remarks. And I was thinking about what else to speak with you about tonight, and there are myriad other civil liberties issues of great importance. But there's one in particular that I'm going to highlight tonight, and that's the California state budget crisis. So, as I'm sure this very well-informed population is aware, we began this year in California with a $26 billion budget deficit. And after one round of cuts signed into law by the governor, that deficit now stands at a staggering $15 billion. The governor is soon going to issue his mid-May revised budget, probably around May 16th or 15th, we're hearing, and it could be a very frightening all-cuts budget, which I think is something that we really haven't experienced the magnitude of here in California. Not only further reductions to things like the UC, CSU, and community college system, but the total elimination, potentially, of whole state programs. So really pretty scary. And as you may know, in recent years in California, even in this last year, the spending for prisons continues to go up, while funding for higher education and social services is being slashed. And so the governor has this major criminal justice plan that you may have heard about, this realignment plan that's going to shift responsibility from the state to the counties for all of these prisoners. And that plan can only take effect when the funding is secured, and it may only yield savings in future years if it's implemented according to plan. And counties are struggling right now to figure out, what does this mean and what are they going to do? So there's really a moment for us to watch and see what's going on with that. But as this crisis is unfolding, all of us really can't be silent. We can't expect that our state leaders are going to solve these problems for us. Our voices, our ideas must be part of the conversation, and our feet literally part of this movement. For indeed, it will take a movement to get our state back on track. So that's why, in the midst of all of this fiscal crisis, the ACLU of California is launching our Bring Back Balance sentencing reform campaign. So through this campaign, we're pressing the governor and the legislature to include real criminal justice sentencing reforms as an integral part of the solution to balance the budget, balance our priorities, and balance the scales of justice here in California. So, thank you. What we will accomplish this year will lay the foundation for a much longer-term campaign for smart corrections reforms and real public safety. Ending the system of mass incarceration in California and our country and replacing it with solutions that promote real public safety is the end game. It's the long-term goal. And this really is, folks, this is one of the most defining civil liberties issues of our time. And just to share one of many facts about why so much is at stake, there are more African Americans today in correctional control in the United States, that's prison, jail, on parole or probation, more today than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the civil rights began. At this time, through our Bring Back Balance campaign, ACLU is promoting two specific reforms that I want to share with you that would begin to address this enormous problem of mass incarceration and free up hundreds of millions of dollars for our state. So number one, make the penalty for the possession of a small amount of drugs a misdemeanor instead of a felony. Yeah? All right? It makes sense, doesn't it? As you may know, there's over 9,000 people locked up in state prison today for these offenses at a cost to taxpayers of hundreds of millions of dollars per year, with sentences as long as 3 years. Reform number two, make low-level, non-violent property offenses, such as writing a bad check, misdemeanors instead of wobblers that could be charged as felonies. Okay? So, I think that's a good idea? Sounds like a good idea. So a wobbler, as many folks may know, I think we have a lot of attorneys here, but for those who don't know, a wobbler is an offense that prosecutors can charge as either a felony or a misdemeanor. And if it's charged as a misdemeanor, the maximum sentence is 1 year in county jail. But if these same offenses are charged as a felony, they can carry sentences as long as 3 years in state prison. So if we change these wobblers to misdemeanors, there would be significant savings, and we wouldn't be keeping people locked in cages for years who really don't need to be there. So as you and countless other activists are talking to your elected officials about the budget crisis, we look forward to working with you to put these balanced solutions forward as workable alternatives to the devastating cuts that politicians are threatening for our state. If you're interested in getting more involved in the campaign, please see me or the chapter leadership. And my colleague Brandy here is a student at Sonoma State. Brandy's starting a campaign on her campus to educate students about this issue. And she's got some letters to the governor that you can sign back at the ACLU table. So I ask everyone to sign a letter to Governor Brown that speaks about these reforms. So in closing, I'll just say, if you like what you hear tonight at this event, please tell one other person who isn't here about the ACLU and the work that we're doing. Thank you for your support, and we definitely are always looking for more members, so if you want to visit our table and sign up for My ACLU, we would certainly appreciate it, and thank you so much for your attention and participation.
chapter and see if we can find them. Evan Livingstone with the film camera. Nancy Colandotti, where are you, Nancy? She was serving at there she is back at the bar. Steve Fabian is back there with Nancy. I said Steve did all the work on the program. Steve has done an enormous amount of work on this dinner. There is a committee, several of us have worked on it, trying to get things organized, but it's all gone through one person who has had all this stuff in mind and has pushed it, and that is Steve. And he does a terrific job. And where is Rick? Rick Koshner. Rick is also active in the Committee for Immigrant Rights of Sonoma County, and he does a tremendous amount of work on behalf of the immigrants in the county. So we're grateful to have him on our board. He brings a great perspective to it. Did I leave anybody out? It's not a big board. Now, if Lynn is here, I'd like to call on Lynn Howard. There's Lynn. Okay. Lynn, would you introduce yourself?
Okay. I'm told I need to introduce myself. So I'm Lynn Hollander Savio, and first, many thanks to the Sonoma County chapter of the ACLU for establishing this award, the Mario Savio Student Activist Award, in Mario's honor. It's wonderful that this chapter has made a commitment to inspiring and helping a new generation of activist youth. This year's winner of the Mario Savio Award, though, Maggie Koshner, seems to have needed no such inspiration, although I'm sure the accompanying stipend will come in handy. She was, as she put it to me, attending marches for social justice while in utero. And throughout her childhood, she was schlepped by her parents, Kim and Rick, to picket lines and meetings for workers and immigrant rights. These formative experiences led Maggie to her own activism, starting in middle school, where she became involved in the student walkout opposing anti-immigration legislation, joining the largest demonstration in Sonoma County history. Maggie also began participating in Theater of the Oppressed with the Instituto Sanchez Mendoza, a local nonprofit promoting organizing in the immigrant community through popular education methods. While attending Santa Rosa High School, Maggie worked with Free Mind Media, a group which served as a radical resource center, providing meeting space, cultural and political events, and media resources for young people. She also co-founded an activist club giving campus support to efforts to curb police violence and stop the use of tasers by the Sheriff's Department. Maggie's concern with issues of police brutality and police interaction with minority and immigrant communities has continued to be a major aspect of her activism. She was one of a core group of organizers for O22 in 2008 and 2009, planning and organizing local participation in the annual National Day Against Police Brutality. Today, through her involvement in the Committee for Immigration Rights, She is working to stop local police agencies from impounding the cars of undocumented immigrants. In addition, Maggie is focused on youth organizing as one of a small group currently building the organization Strike. This group is centered on fighting budget cuts, particularly those affecting young people. They intend to work locally while building alliances and ties with similar organizations elsewhere. Throughout Maggie's activities, one of her major efforts has been to educate herself both about the issues that concern her and the principles and strategies of community organizing. As Marty Bennett, one of her teachers at the JC, has observed, she is trying to develop herself for the long haul, to develop the skills and attitudes that will make her an effective movement builder and leader of collective action. He goes on to note that she is analytical beyond her years. She tries to connect all the dots to understand how we can make major changes to obtain economic and social justice. Maggie's efforts in this area have included 4 months in the Woolman Semester, a program of service learning for peace and global citizenship, where she experienced what she describes as eye-opening trips to border crossing areas, her enrollment in the Philosophy of Peace and Nonviolent Action course at the JC, and her current participation in the Ann Braden Anti-Racist Training Program for white social justice activists that is run by the Catalyst Project. This involves spending every weekend in San Francisco learning how to be effective and helpful as a white person doing anti-racism work and working with people of color. As Davin Cardenas of the Committee for Immigrant Rights and the North Bay Organizing Project notes, Maggie is willing to challenge herself in her own political learning and growth. She takes herself seriously as a political animal, manifesting a responsibility that is not always common to young activists. She is well on her way to becoming a very powerful woman and political force. I am delighted on behalf of the ACLU to present Maggie with this plaque. There will be a check in the mail for $500. And from me personally, an outstanding biography, Mario Savio and the Radical Legacy of the 1960s. Freedom's Orator is the name of the book. Congratulations, Maggie, on winning the 2011 Sonoma County ACLU Mario Savio Student Activist Award.
Legacy of resistance that is student activism in Sonoma County. I know it runs deep. And yet, up here, I knew it, I feel strangely alone, because the most powerful and proud moments of my political life have been as part of a collective project. In fact, a lot of the learning that I've had to do in the short time I've been here on this earth has been that any efforts I make politically won't go very far if I do it alone. I used to self-identify as an activist, and I think that came out of
this ethic that I've had since I was really young, that like, if I identified a problem, it was my responsibility to be a part of the solution. Which is great, right? But then, if my, partaking in the solution is just a reaction to injustice, as an effort to like maintain integrity and my own values, that is really important. It's also exhausting. What's right? I think something that the left talks about a lot right now is this epidemic of burnout. And a very wise movement elder has told me, Sharon Martinez, that burnout is in fact or political exhaustion is a disconnect from vision. So what I'm looking for now is to place myself in the narrative, and what I urge you all to do, to avoid burnout, because it's awful. It's to see a narrative of political work, where in the end, we win. And to see everything we do as a part of that narrative. So I became involved in O22 because I had that strong desire to be a part of the collective force that would reach us to victory. And so I found that, and I found that committing myself to reaching the finish line takes a lot of work. And it also, I kept seeking that vision, and that led me to Free My Media, because I wasn't satisfied with just looking at reacting to the symptom of the problem, the tip of the iceberg, because that's also exhausting. It's selling ourselves short just to look at the symptoms. Rather, we need to be hitting the bottom of the iceberg as much as possible. And so I became involved in Free Mind to deepen my political analysis and to see myself and my political identity as a white person, as a young woman, as a young person, and a member of the middle class in this world. And so deepening my vision, I found it to be really nourishing. Another sort of hip thing to talk about, I think, in the left is self-care. And along those lines, a friend of mine sent to me a quote by E.B. White that I really liked. It goes, "Every day I wake torn between the desire to save the world and the impulse to savor it. This makes it hard to plan the day." And I sympathize, but I want to do both, save and savor at the very same time. And nothing has taught me to do that, where I haven't been able to do that better than when I'm with the Committee for Immigrant Rights. Because a constant in my life has been this contrast between my privileged life and a relatively privileged life relative to undocumented immigrants, neighbors and friends and family and loved ones, comrades. And if I'm truly to embrace my community, I need to be in struggle with them. And being in struggle with the Committee for Immigrant Rights has been such a rewarding experience. We've really created a family out of those of us who work together there, and it's so nourishing. So I've started to think of activism in a different way. It's like, it's taking political action, right? So we all live in, basically everything is political. So we can choose to engage in it or play a passive role. And I'm in favor of us all engaging as a part of self-care, as a part of, affirming our own humanity. I'm also in favor of brushing your teeth. As, self-care, right? So if I'm an activist, I'm a toothbrusher. That's look at burnout and self-care, that kind of thing, right? Let's do the work that nourishes us. Another thing I want to touch on really quickly is something that, of course, I can't speak for all young activists in Sonoma County. There are plenty of us. But I do believe we're evolving towards seeing ourselves as playing a historic role, as being agents of change in history, which is really exciting. So a previous speaker talked about the economic crisis we're in, and it's really, it targets young people in a very particular way, because it's not just, the present, our education that's under attack, it's our future. And these things that are being cut, they might not come back if we don't fight for them now. So they're very real. And so young people in Sonoma County decided to seize these historic moments. We formed this organization called Strike, and we're trying to fight back against the budget cuts. But we also want to keep that vision in mind, right? And in the legacy of Mario Savio, take control of our own education and transform the education system so that it really meets our needs, and not just, fighting to maintain the status quo. So I think that kind of collective, nourishing, and visionary political work that I'm embarking on is going to keep me in the movement for a lifetime, or as long as it takes, whichever comes first.
That's inspiring. I've got a little personal insert here that wasn't on the program, but I read that Maggie was inspired by reading the writings of Barbara Deming. And there happened to have come out recently a double biography of Barbara Deming and another radical. And I was fascinated to read it. And Barbara Deming is somebody you are just floored by her commitment, her vision, and her tremendous courage. But so I'd like to give you a copy of this book I happen to have. It's called The Saving Remnant. And the other person who is featured in this double biography is a guy named David McReynolds, who happens to be my brother. Tommy, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you your plaque after you talk, okay? I got to talk first, and then I think it'll work out.
You're a lawyer.
Oh, okay. I'm not, actually, but I'm an old retired journalist. I was going to tell you that when the word got around that we were going to give the Jack Green Civil Liberties Award to Tommy Smothers, one of the veteran members of the ACLU in our chapter said, we wanted to give him that award years ago, but we didn't know how to get a hold of it. That's true. And what happened? Now, here, I haven't been around Sonoma County that long myself, just since 2000, but I've gotten to know some people who know a lot of people. And one of them is Tom Farrell, who's sitting back there, with his wife Evelyn. And Tom gave me some good pointers on how to get in touch with Tommy. Now, Tom himself is kind of an upstart. He only got here from Butte, Montana about 80 years ago, I think. But by this time, he knows everybody in Sonoma County. And the other person who was key to this was my senior autobiography teacher, Geets Vincent, who's sitting back here. And Geets knows a lot of people. I've been in her class for 7 years, and I haven't graduated yet. Very inspiring to people, to seniors, to write down their life histories. And she happens to be a great friend of Jeannie Schultz, and she said, Jeannie knows how to get in touch with Tommy. So Jeannie's here too. I want to thank both of you. And that's how I was able to get in touch with Tommy. And Tommy doesn't need honors, but he said, you know, if it's for the ACLU, he agreed to come and receive it. I really appreciate that. I think we are all pretty familiar with the background. There's some of it in the program of how Tommy and his brother Dick had a groundbreaking TV series and they got fired for it because they were trying to push the envelope. They were trying to have the American public exposed to people like Pete Seeger and Joan Baez. They were trying to deal with topics like the Vietnam War and racism. And they kept running into censorship and running into it. And I gather that Tommy is very hard-headed because he wouldn't put up with it. He kept pushing. And finally CBS said, all right, they're fired. Now, Tommy and Dick came back and sued CBS and won. And that was not the end of the Smothers brothers. They later came back on TV. In the meantime, they have been touring ever since. They, I think, are the longest-lasting comedy duo in U.S. history. And they're still going. And after the little dust-up with CBS, Tommy kept after it. I think it's in the program that he was present when Jack Lennon and Yoko Ono had their bed in, and Tommy was there playing the guitar with them.
John Lennon.
What did I call him?
Jack.
Oh, for God's sakes. John Lennon. Jack Lennon and Ralph Harrison and all those guys. John Lennon and Yoko Ono, I'm sorry. And Tommy has not retreated from his position. And just a few years ago, in 2008, he was belatedly given an Emmy Award for his writing on the comedy album. And he didn't take credit for it at the time because he didn't want to ruin the chances of his writing team by having his name attached to it. But in fact, he was one of the chief writers on that show. And he was finally recognized with an Emmy in 2008. And I just want to quote very briefly. He said, I dedicate this Emmy to all of the people who feel compelled to speak out and not afraid to speak to power and won't shut up and refuse to be silenced. Tommy has been kind enough to provide us with a brief video that I know you're going to enjoy. So, Dana, we're ready for the video.
Thank you very much. If you do realize this was 40 years ago. And it's a wonderful a posthumous acknowledgement. I appreciate that. I thought we'd show that to show how things have changed, but to accept the Jack Green Award, I appreciate the ACLU. When we were fired in 1969 of April, it went through a month or two of lawyers and accountants and attorneys, and when I realized that this was serious, a lot of the attorneys who were show business attorneys were handling this stuff. Everybody said, well, I don't know if I want to deal with this because they all had clients from show business. But it ended up with a man named George Slaff, who was former president in Southern California, ACLU, who stood up and was my attorney and my brother's attorney. And so there's a fondness there. And Melvin and Myers, the biggest law firm in western Mississippi, of course they had them by CBS, and there was George Slaff. It looked like the Esquire man, little white hair, a beautiful beard. And we prevailed, but it seems quaint, some of the issues we were dealing with. And each decade we have markers that we go through that things have changed. And when I see Mason Williams doing the censorships with scissor purpose poised, seems quaint also in today's world of any scatological conversations and people saying anything, and Glenn Beck and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seems quaint, but each generation has their walls they have to stand up to. And sometimes, it's 40 years later, I look back in this whole experience with the Smothers brothers and free speech and everything and being fired, and I'm much more mellow and more secure and more. I look back at it with a calmness that is. I'm still pissed off, but I'm cool. But as I walked around, I was talking with and running into people saying, well, thank you very much. You've been an inspiration for me. I'm kind of embarrassed because of the work of other people I was an incidental hero on the way to doing something I want to do. And I think there are heroes everywhere. And we don't know that we have this gift until we're pushed against that issue, or whatever the issue may be. And I was a naive folk singer going through things. They said, oh, you can't say that. I said, why not? And so I'm calm, and my brother is Dick, and Smothers Brothers, and we've just retired. We've been 52 years working together. I love him. I don't like him. We've been face to face for so many years, but I travel now, less and less recognition, which I'm comfortable with. But I remember when I was doing road trips, someone said, aren't you one of Smothers Brothers? I say, yeah. He said, which one are you? And I say, I'm the dumb one. I say, I know that, but which one? I went to San Jose State. I didn't graduate, but I got it later on. Many years later, I was given the honorary doctorates. It was very nice. But when I was at San Jose State, when I got out of San Jose State, my first job, not as a performer, but when I finished San Jose State, my first job was as a air traffic controller. That's when I went into show business. I tend to live my life in the past because that's where most of it is. But all of us, we have to go out on a limb once in a while because that's where the fruit is. And I like the heroes, and so impressed by Maggie. What a wonderful, wonderful concept. As a person, and I never was there where she was, or where she is now. And it's so inspiring, because I was just as an accidental tourist through the thing, which someone don't step on me, not with a particular thing in mind. I just happened to be there. And I feel this way. It was a Mark Twain quote. He said, it's better to deserve honors and not get them than to have them and not deserve them. And I feel that way, but when I look at that young lady and the commitment to it. I just want to share, I'm not going to be long, share with my heroes, just briefly, the heroes that in the recent last 20, 30 of my decades are Pete Seeger, Ralph Nader, Louis Lapham, Harper editor, George Carlin, Bill Maher, Michael Moore, Frank Herbert, who wrote News. If you haven't read those, read it again. It's precious. It's incredible observations of what's happening today around the world. Frank Herbert. And I don't watch television anymore since Keith Olbermann walked away. What a passionate, wonderful, dedicated man he is. And, we try to define ourselves. Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. So I always said, if you be yourself, you might as well be yourself because everybody else is taken. And I was going to say one funny thing, but after her commitment to politics, we get cynical. And I am so cynical. I get so pissed off all the time. And it's very hard sometimes as we get older to keep our spirit. And I look around, I've never been around so many wonderful left-wing radicals. It's so sweet and good to know that you people care about civil rights and individual taking care of people. And I was going to say that this is a quote too. I said, I never believe in anything. I never believe anything in politics unless it's officially denied. And I don't want to dismiss politics. Is that why we're here? That's what the ACLU does. It deals in the arena, which seems getting smaller and smaller. The definition of politics, it comes from the Greek word, poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. But I don't dismiss our interest in politics. Just a quick observation. There's a couple of aphorisms are so cool, and one of them was, I don't know why this caught me, but what laziness? We're all sometimes a little lazy, unless we have great passion. Laziness is just the habit of resting before you're tired. What have future generations ever done for us? So I leave you with this thought. If you don't know what you're talking about, it's really hard to know when you're finished. I'm finished. Thank you.
You'll rarely hear something that is so truthful and so entertaining. I want to give Tommy this plaque, the American Civil Liberties Union of Sonoma County, the 2011 Jack Green Civil Liberties Award.
This is great. I'll put it right next to my Tea Party membership.
This is a certificate from the California State Assembly from Jared Huffman, who's assemblyman for your district up there in Kenwood.
It's too much.
Where's the money? Yeah. Here's one from our state senator, Noreen Evans, Tom Smothers, for his activism and struggle for justice, fighting for civil liberties. And this is Which one would you first? Well, we got two more. This will be cool.
It's funny, your life's over and they start giving you goddamn awards.
This is from the Congressional Records proceedings of Monday, May 2nd. Extension of remarks introduced by Representative Lynn Woolsey. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor an American hero.
Don't read that. No, thank you very much, Honor.
Okay, one more, I won't read it. I would just say this is somebody that wanted to send you her warmest greetings is Dianne Feinstein, United States Senator.
This is great. Dear Mr. Smothers, I'd like to apologize for my lack of taking care of goddamn business.
And yeah, now it's Steve Fabian's turn to introduce our principal speaker.
Well, I guess I could say I never thought in my life I'd be following Tom Smothers. But I kind of like it, actually, now that you think about it. So I think I'll talk for a while. No. You know, in your event program, it states that Grady Reitman's, quote, primary research interest is the intersection between personal privacy and technology, particularly social networking privacy, locational privacy, and online tracking. Now, most people have no idea what the heck these things mean, but that doesn't mean that these are not important issues. In the past few decades of the growth of the internet, the meaning of and the need for privacy has totally changed. Only today could a third grade student stand before his class and give the following report. For show and tell today, I've brought the individual credit reports of the entire faculty that I've downloaded from the internet. Hardly a week goes by where one does not hear or read of another data theft or a hacker breaking into a website with tens of millions of people's identities, emails, addresses, passwords, credit card numbers, and other personal information being stolen. What is usually not in the headlines and stories, even more insidious. It's a story about how the many ways in which the government, businesses, criminals, and others are collecting, aggregating, and using information about you that they get from the internet, smartphones, and other electronic devices to assemble a dossier about you. The Electronic Frontiers Foundation was founded in 1990 to confront these cutting-edge issues, defending free speech, privacy, innovation, and consumer rights. The EFF uses lawyers, policy analysts, activists, and technologists to promote public interest in digital rights. It advises policymakers and legislators, educates the press and public, and fights government and corporations in court. The ACLU has had the privilege to join the EFF in these battles over the years. Our keynote speaker, Grady Reitman, is one of the warriors in the battle to protect your privacy. He started a career in the corporate world, but left it to join the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, a San Diego-based nonprofit advocacy and education organization promoting consumer privacy. At PRC, she's mentored by and worked with its founder and director, Beth Gibbons, the author of The Privacy Rights Handbook, How to Take Control of Your Personal Identification Information. Grady served Director of Communications for the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse and investigator most extensively on issues affecting consumer privacy, specializing in online data brokers, data breaches, and social networking privacy. From there, she was drawn to EFF, which she joined and leads the activism team to educate and empower the public on their online rights and to mobilize them to battle bad legislation. If you'd like to learn more about the Electronic Frontier Foundation, visit their table in the back over there. Ms. Reitman has served as a resource for television, radio, and print news outlets, including The Guardian, Time Magazine, Chicago Tribune, the Los Angeles Times, and the Journal for Information, Security, and Privacy. In addition to her work at EFF, Rady serves as the steering committee member for the Bradley Manning Support Network, a network of individuals and organizations advocating for the release of accused WikiLeaks whistleblower Private First Class Bradley Manning. She also volunteers with several nonprofit and feminist organizations. So without further ado, I present to you our keynote speaker, Ms. Rady Raymond.
I'm someone who's more comfortable with a computer. So I brought one. Thank you guys very much for having me tonight. When I got the call about this, I was incredibly pleased because I myself am an active ACLU member, and I believe they are doing some of the most important work a civil liberties organization can do. And I have the great pleasure of working with a similar organization, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I also was particularly pleased that you wanted me to speak about perhaps my favorite topic on earth, online privacy. So here's what we'll tell you about today. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but I think there are a few things that you should know if you are someone who, for whatever reason, is driven to log on to the internet. I'm going to talk about what this right to privacy is, and whether or not you still get to keep it when you go online. I'm going to talk about what I termed the corporate surveillance, and the role that corporations can play or cannot play in facilitating state surveillance. And I am an activist, and I am a somewhat hopeful person. And so I'm going to end with things that are happening right now that are giving me hope, and ways that you can get involved in the movement to promote digital privacy. And I thought we would start by talking about something that recently happened in Tunisia. If you have been following the news, you may have noticed that Tunisia underwent a democratic revolution. This started last year in 2010 when they began protesting in the streets. And the government there held on for a little while. In January of 2011, the government, in reaction to the protests, actually launched an attack on how people there could use the internet. They did what's known as a JavaScript injection attack, and what that did allowed them to siphon off the names, the passwords and usernames of Tunisians who were logging into Google and Yahoo and Facebook. They were able to get into these accounts, presumably downloaded whatever data they thought was valuable, and then delete these accounts. And this was particularly problematic because at the time, Tunisians were not able to access many of the websites that you or I would go to share videos. They were using Facebook to share videos that they took of the protests, often of the violence that took place, and of the victims of people who had been killed. They were also using Facebook for organizing. And when the government did this, they specifically went after bloggers. People like Slim. Slim is a well-known blogger in Tunisia, and he's also a friend of the EFF. In Tunisia, bloggers are like the media. When you can't rely on your newspapers to give you accurate information about what's going on, you can turn to bloggers like Slim, who were tireless advocates for the people's voice, and who were also activists who championed free speech and went up against censorship.
And bloggers like Slim were arrested in large part because the government was able to access their social networking accounts. It turned out all right for Slim. He was later freed when Ben Ali fled the country, and Slim was actually made the Secretary of Sport and Youth. But it sort of raises questions about what happened there, about how the government was able to misuse social networks and internet communications technologies for surveillance and ultimately for oppression of the people. And that's something that I'm sure all of us have always thought, well, that could never happen here in America because we are a democracy and we have fundamental rights to freedom and to privacy and to free speech. And that's a question I'm going to take the next few minutes to explore and to talk about how it is and where it is that the government, our government, is peering into our lives through social networking sites and through internet technologies and communications technologies. And while I'm not going to spend much time on it at all, I did want to just talk about, well, we know about the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Doesn't that give us a right to privacy from the government? And yes, it does. It's called constitutional privacy, and while privacy isn't specifically mentioned in the Bill of Rights, it is strongly implied. And generally, without getting into it, that sort of means that there are limits on how the government can spy on you. On the other side of the privacy coin, if we were to call it that, is what is known as consumer privacy. And that's not about the government spying on you, that's about how companies can collect information about you. And this is a patchwork of laws that would apply here. Laws like HIPAA, which govern medical privacy, and Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which affect your financial privacy. You've got video rental records privacy. You've got privacy on whether or not you get to see a law about whether or not you get to see a privacy policy on a website. It's a patchwork system, and like any patchwork system, there are places of strength and weaknesses, and there are places where we don't necessarily have a particular law that would apply at all. And what that means is that sometimes companies can spy on you in ways that the government couldn't. Mark Zuckerberg is a famous man who founded a very famous and extremely popular website known as Facebook. He was talking last year at the Crunchy Awards, and he said, when we got started just in my dorm room at Harvard, the question that a lot of people asked is, why would I want to put any information on the internet at all? But people have really gotten comfortable not only sharing more information in different kinds, but more openly and with more people. And that social norm is just something that has evolved over time. And he's really pointing to this idea that more of our information is going into these digital worlds. And Facebook is a great point to bring up. There are over 500 million active users of Facebook. I suspect there are even a few Facebook users here tonight. The average Facebook user has over 130 friends. And everything that goes into a Facebook account, your activities, your interests, your photos, your location data, even your thoughts if you're putting them up in status updates, your relationships, all of that is put in a format that Facebook finds it easy to collate and mine, and they do it specifically to show you advertisements that they think you're more likely to click on. And Facebook is an interesting case in particular because it has gone beyond the walls of a particular domain name. They are starting to dot around the internet. You'll see it around with little Facebook like buttons on different websites that you visit. And when you see those like buttons, it's not only an avenue for you to connect back with your profile on Facebook, but you should take it for granted that it likely indicates that they're putting some type of tracking cookie on your computer, so that even if you don't log into Facebook, even if you are not a Facebook user, it is possible you are getting tracked. Julian Assange last week had a very interesting interview with Russia Today, in which he called Facebook the most appalling spying machine that has ever been invented. And while I didn't agree with everything that Julian Assange said, I did find that to be a particularly intriguing idea. But we have to understand that Facebook isn't the only company out there that is doing this. There are tons of companies that we use to communicate and to access the internet and to access information through the internet that are collecting data on individuals in ways that 30 years ago we couldn't have even imagined. Sometimes this collection is unseen. It's happening through third-party tracking companies. And sometimes it is misleading. If you look here at all of these different company names, I found those by going to Match.com. I was doing a little investigation on them. Match.com is a very popular online dating site. It's one of the absolute largest. And when you sign up for an account on Match.com, they ask you many, many, many questions about your life and your interests, all sorts of things. And then if you go and look at the privacy policy for this company, you find out that they're actually giving that information to all of these other companies. All of these companies are under the same umbrella company as Match.com. They are all actively exchanging data about their users. And upon request, they'll give that data to the government. So what can you do about that? Can you call the company up and say, I want to know everything that you could possibly have on me, that you maybe even collected from somebody from a different company that you have a relationship with? Not necessarily. Those companies probably won't have any reason. There's certainly no law that would necessitate them giving you access to that. Can you delete your account? Maybe. Some sites you can, and other sites, they only suspend your account in case you want to come back later. And sometimes even if they do delete the information that you can access, they may hang on to it in their own databases. So this raises the question about when the government wants to get information from you. Are they going to come to your house and knock on the door, or are they going to send you a friend request on Facebook? And that's a good question. We don't necessarily have the answer to it, but we have some things that seem to imply what they're starting to do more frequently. In December of 2010, Twitter received an order. Twitter is a microblogging online social network that's extremely popular. They received an order in relation to the WikiLeaks investigation. Now, I mentioned someone from WikiLeaks a moment ago, and I thought I would, in case people aren't aware of it, just mention them again. WikiLeaks is an online whistleblowing website that has published a lot of materials that the United States government finds embarrassing or disturbing. And the Department of Justice, as part of an investigation into this website, served an order to Twitter and asked them to provide information on certain members who use Twitter, including this woman, Birgitta Jonsdottir. Birgitta is an activist. She is a poet. She's a mother, and she's an Icelandic member of parliament. And she did not know that she had been that her information had been solicited as part of this government request. The only way she found out about it was because Twitter decided not to fulfill that request. Twitter said, we have a policy of always telling our users when the government is seeking their data. And so we're going to tell Birgitta unless you tell us we're legally obligated not to. And the government backed down. And so Birgitta and two other people who were in that case, Rope and Jacob Applebaum, were able to fight back and get due process before their information was solicited. But that made us over at the EFF curious about what other companies might be receiving similar requests for data from the government, and how many of those companies would be willing to do what Twitter did and stand up for user privacy. So we took a look at those companies, and we took a look at their policies, and we went through the court histories to see whether or not they had gone to court to defend user privacy. And we found that of all the major companies that we looked at, Amazon and Apple and AT&T and Comcast and Google and Facebook and MySpace, the only one that was willing to put in writing in a law enforcement guide or terms of service that they would tell a user if their data was requested by the government unless they were legally prevented from doing so was Twitter. So when we ask, well, is there a possibility that companies are giving data to the government? The answer is maybe. And that sort of has been part of a broader question that we've been asking at EFF. EFF is engaged in Freedom of Information Act requests. This is where we ask the government to give us information that we believe belongs in the public domain. It's a right, it's part of the Freedom of Information Act, one of the better laws that are out there. We have specifically asked the government to tell us how and when they're using social networking sites to surveil people. And I thought I would share with you some of the information that we've gotten back from this lawsuit, from these lawsuits that we're engaged in, to get this kind of information from the government. We found a PowerPoint presentation from the Department of Homeland Security and their description of a social networking monitoring center in which they engaged in sort of broad-scale surveillance of social networking sites prior to, for some time before, and during the Obama inauguration. And we also pulled a memo from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And they have been using social networking sites for virtual site visits. And I think the text is a little too small for you, so I'm going to read it. It says, narcissistic tendencies in many people fuels a need to have a large group of quote-unquote friends linked to their pages. And many of these people accept cyber friends that they don't even know. This provides an excellent vantage point for FDNS to observe the daily life of beneficiaries and petitioners. So that they are actually going out there and soliciting friend requests through social media accounts like Facebook. We got a number of slides back from the Department of Justice. The most interesting, I thought, was this one about how they are culling information through Facebook, and they specifically call out Facebook as being often cooperative with emergency requests. None of the other social networking sites were noted as being cooperative with emergency requests. And then we also got some from the Drug Enforcement Agency. And this was particularly interesting because it reinforced something that we had heard anecdotally for some time, but that the government is particularly interested in mapping social relationships, that they are looking to find out through social networking sites the sort of social graph as it is, how you are connected to other people, how they're connected to other people. And the DEA uses a free tool that you can use online to analyze different social networking accounts. This one is for YouTube. And as you can see, I actually use it here to show you. You put in a YouTube account, and then it shows you all the other accounts it's connected to. And when you mouse over it and you click on one of these little dots, it tells you the name, the age of the person, when they joined YouTube, and then other information about them. And then finally, if this wasn't enough for you, if you thought, well, nonetheless, it's not going to happen to me, we come to AT&T. Does anyone here use AT&T? Okay. So AT&T installed a fiber optic splitter at 611 Folsom Street in San Francisco, in which they copied all of the emails, the web browsing history, the internet traffic, everything of the AT&T customers getting an internet service, and they sent a copy to the NSA. They did this for years. In fact, they may still be doing this. We found out about it. We'd heard anecdotal reports. There was some discussion of it. And then AT&T technician Mark Klein actually came to EFF with proof, which resulted in us pursuing 2 lawsuits, one against AT&T and one against the government. This is a picture. See? Millions of people, all of their data going through AT&T, NSA. And what you should take away from this in particular is, well, if this is millions and millions of people, how many of those people are suspected terrorists? How many of those people are involved in some sort of investigation? How many of them are suspected to be engaged in criminal activity? And how many of them are just regular people like you and me who are using the internet to communicate and to share information with their friends and family members and to access information that they think would be helpful to them in understanding the world? We actually, in the AT&T case, you should know that Congress in 2006 passed telecom immunity, which means that AT&T cannot be held liable for doing this, for invading the privacy of millions of people. So, why did I show you all of this? Well, I wanted to sort of perhaps make you a little bit nervous, a little bit uncomfortable, but also to talk about how the government is increasingly utilizing tools that we rely on to communicate in order to obtain data on people. The government doesn't need to wiretap your house if they can rely on corporations that are already doing such an effective job of surveillance in order to get data. And where does this go? 100 years from now, where could this lead us? If the sort of soft and cozy, and as it was called in one slide, cooperative relationship between governments and corporations is allowed to continue, are we going to end up in a place where it's very hard for us to have any privacy at all? Are we going to end up in a place where we need these technologies to communicate and live in the real world, but we can't have any form of privacy in our communications or, dare I say, free speech? And yes, unchecked, I would say that's a fair assessment. But there's hope. There are things that we can do. And there are a few things that are giving me hope, which I thought I would start with. And the first thing that always gives me hope is that kids care about privacy. That even as we're using technology more and more, our values that rely and uphold privacy aren't changing, and they're not changing for the next generation. While there's a lot of anecdotal stories about kids oversharing online, in fact, when you do scientific surveys of children, and I'm talking not young children, but teenagers up until their 30s, so like 12 to 30, you find that kids overwhelmingly are similar to adults in how they approach privacy issues. They will refuse to give information to a business if they think it's unnecessary or too personal. They believe that anyone who uploads a photo about them should get their permission first. The vast majority of kids feel this way. They believe that there should be a law that gives people the right to know all of the information a website has about them. And they believe there should be a law that requires websites to delete all stored information about an individual. These are privacy idealists. And I also put on this slide Congress. So Congress did some things earlier today that I found out about that maybe make me wish I hadn't put this slide up here. But one of the things they have talked about is earlier this year the Patriot Act came up for reauthorization. The Patriot Act, as you being ACLU members probably know, is something that lowered the standards by which the government was able to surveil regular people for various investigations. And it sort of, it really did a lot of bad things. And a lot of the most concerning provisions were actually supposed to expire after a certain period of time, and they keep getting renewed. But this year, they didn't all get renewed. And instead of reauthorizing the Patriot Act for a year or several years, the Congress reauthorized it for 3 months. And during that 3 months, they promised to engage in robust debates about whether or not the Patriot Act needed reform. We are coming up on the end of that time period. It ends at the end of this month. And right now, Congress is deciding whether or not to reauthorize the Patriot Act. So if you have been waiting to contact your congressman about this issue, I urge you, please do not wait any longer. And if you are looking for a way to do it, I'm sure they have it on ACLU's website, and you can also see it on EFF.org/action. Congress has also been circulating a range of privacy bills, and some of these are really good, and some of them are terrible. But at least they are privacy bills, which tells me that Congress at least has noticed that there is a serious issue with online privacy today. And whether or not Congress passes any of those bills At least industry is getting the message that people are starting to care and Congress will react. And Congress has also shown itself responsive to scandals, such as the iPhone privacy scandal that recently happened. And they'll be having a hearing on May 10th. So Congress gives me a little bit of hope. But what gives me a lot more hope than Congress is technology. Even as technology is being created that can invade our privacy, there are many technologists who are also activists. They may be driven by passion instead of money, and they may be creating technologies that help you maintain your anonymity and your privacy online. Unfortunately, because these are often not funded by corporate efforts, many of these efforts go unfinished. But some of them do go on to create amazing technologies that can help you be more private. I named a few here, and I don't want to go into depth about how they work because each one of those is worth its own PowerPoint presentation, but Tor can help you mask your IP address. OTR, off-the-record chat, it's just like any other chat system on the internet, only encrypted. And then HTTPS Everywhere, another powerful tool that is very easy to use, can help you be more private online. So all of these tools and many others that I can't list here are free to use, and they can help you even to the point of if your data is being sent to the NSA by AT&T, if it's encrypted, the NSA can't read it. And particularly, I think that this is inspiring because activists like this and people who are creating these technologies, because they aren't making money off of it, they don't have a financial motive for collecting data on users. So I promise to end this with things that you can do. And so I'm going to wrap up here and just talk, so we've got a problem here. What can each of you do about it? And I like to think of there being 4 battlefields in privacy, and I apologize for the war metaphor. But the first is consumers who are handing over their data voluntarily or ignorantly, either because they don't think to resist, or they don't realize where it's going, or they don't know how to protect it. And then we have companies that are vacuuming up more data than they need and storing it unnecessarily, because if the government shows up and asks for information from a company, and a company says, we didn't keep it, then we wouldn't really be in the situation we are today. And then the third issue is the one that's the hardest to pinpoint, the hardest to prove, and perhaps the most pernicious, which is companies that are too eager to share information with the government. And then the fourth, of course, is a lack of good, strong laws that prevent overbroad legal authority of the government to invade our privacy. And the first thing you can do about this is educate yourself. Find out what's going on in the world today. Stay up to date on this online privacy debate, and look to people like the ACLU and EFF to guide you on breaking issues and pending legislation. And then start using the technology. I talked about it briefly, but if you go onto our site, EFF.org, we have thorough guides on this technology. And if regular people started using technology that made their communications more private, we would be in a whole different world. This doesn't need to be technology that only a handful of people have access to. It needs to be technology that everybody has access to. And then join our movement. I consider all of us that are using the internet to be part of this digital activist movement. And you can often find on ACLU or EFF ways to get involved. We often have petitions or letters, but we also have interactive campaigns. Sometimes we'll ask you to set up a particular type of Tor node on your computer, and I apologize for people who don't know what that is. But we do have explanatory videos on our site if you wanted to find out what that was. Or you could engage in many of our White House call-in days. But even if you don't want to do that, then get out there and start changing the narrative. Start setting up blogs or articles to your local paper and tell them that when it comes to privacy, you do care and you do want to have a voice. And this is perhaps the most difficult thing I would ask people to do, and I think the most powerful. Well, up there. And that is to resist. When a company asks for your information, don't give it to them. When they want your email address so that you can read an article on a website, don't give them your email address. Don't provide information. And if a company won't let you access their services without giving that information up, then you've got three choices. You can either give up your privacy and give them what they're asking for. You can not use the service at all, or you can give them fake information. And at some point, one day, in my ideal world, we would have so flooded the databases of these corporations with false and inaccurate information that it would become entirely useless to them. And then educate others. If you have family members that use the internet, if you have friends that use it, if you have students, and above all, if you have children, tell them to stand up for privacy rights, because privacy is deeply tied to our rights to free speech, deeply tied to our civil liberties. And the choices we make today will dictate the kind of society we have and our children have years from now. So thank you.
Being kind of a down-home affair, we don't have a lot of money, so we don't pay our speakers, but we do give them a great bottle of Sonoma County wine, so I want to present to you some really nice Pinot Noir from Hartford Court.
Stand by, we have a raffle. And I understand we have about $630, and it's a 50-50 raffle, so we get $315 and the winner gets $315, and I think the runner-up gets the flower arrangement in front of me. You still have a chance to get a raffle. There's Raquel with her hands in the air. If you want to get a raffle ticket, this is your last chance.